Hi, just checking in. It's day 83. So my stats. I've saved $2,075, 415 hours, and 103,750 calories. And my challenge this week was to take on a course. And I'm really fortunate to have been introduced to, I think you pronounce it, Coursera. And I was introduced to this through, from my employer. Being in a post-secondary world, we often get access to professional development and really great resources like Coursera. I think there's like there's a bunch. Anyway, so the challenge I had taken on is to take a course. It's not a short course, so it's going to go on over the course of a few weeks, which is great. And there's all kinds of disciplines that you could look at. For me, I was watching This Hour is 22 Minutes a few weeks ago, and they were talking about Black History Month and how it has to share its time with a fat baby for Valentine's Day, and it's the shortest month, and it's not, February's not the best month, is the opinion anyhow, in the clip, and how March would be a better month for Black History Month, and I couldn't help but agree. So I decided that the course I wanted to take is a Black Lives Matters course. So let's see if I can turn this around and show you. So basically, Coursera has this offer of the Black Lives Matter course through Johns Hopkins University. So it's 4 weeks long, like I said, and you there's a couple of clips that you go through, and there's a bunch of readings. And then there's quizzes. And so if you wanted to pay for the parchment for the certificate, you could, or you can sign up for it like I did. And I'm doing the free one, so I won't get the parchment, but I'll get the education that I'm looking for, which I think, if I can say, I don't know very much about the movement. I know a bit about the history of African Americans' civil rights, and the lasting impressions of segregation and the systemic segregation and the continued racism and the opinions coming from leaders and political figures that isn't probably the right support that's required. In a lot of the readings that I'm doing, it talks about how particularly in America, slavery was brutal. There was zero rights, and I know that's kind of confusing to talk about, but if you study other slavery situations, whole families weren't pulled apart. The families could stay together, and in places where slavery was prominent, and it had like for instance in Brazil, it talks about how slaves had, if they wanted time off, they could get time off. Like, and I'm by no means an expert in the area, and I'm just learning, and I think that's kind of the point I'm making, is that I don't know the history, and I think if you want to make a difference, you need to at least know, and I do. I want to support, and I don't know if I can make a difference in any way, but I think that it's my obligation to learn. Anyway, the things that are really, and I'm only on week 1, there's 4 weeks, so the things that really stood out to me in my first week is liberty is not the same as equality. And then when African Americans were liberated, there was a long time between when civil rights came into play. So voting was not possible. Access to housing was very, very segregated, and the federal benefits that people could avail of, opportunities, were not the same across the board. What was also interesting that I noticed is that in times of slavery, there was a matriarchal figure. So male slaves were used and abused and torn from the family. So the matriarchy stepped in, and it was a predominantly matriarchal kind of household, and how that has sort of streamlined all the way through to today's standards, where it's 1 in 2 households, the African American father is not present. So it's a more matriarchal dynamic again. And if you look at things like access to early childhood education, access to literacy rates, wage, just the overall arrest stats, the whole dynamic is really, so as a whole, you can see that the disparities in the African American culture, but the men and boys are at risk more for this disproportionate behavior. It's hard to, anyway, it's opened up my mind. It's really blown the thoughts of what's going on in America and what's gone on in other parts of the world. And it's motivated me to look, when I am done this course, in Canada, we have our own story. And I think that it's my obligation to look into Indigenous history, because it's something to be told it. Until you read it, until you study it, until you review it from other angles, you can be told over and over again. But if you actually take the time to try to understand the dynamics of it, it's moving in a very strange way, because I come from a place of privilege, even though I don't feel like it some days. I don't, because I've struggled with finances, I've struggled with my own personal demons, and but man, society hasn't written me off, hasn't written me out of the story like it has for so many other people. And so it's a bit emotional when you think about it, and I'm very honored to be able to read about it, and I hope someday to make some kind of difference. So that's why my challenge this week is to, so instead of this, how about that? Instead of drinking, how about learning something new? All right, thanks, and check in next week.